naman po sa amin ng Magnificent Seven o ang Transport Organization na may 7 malaking transport groups na hindi po sila sasali po sa transport strike. Dahil dito magde-deploy yung MMDA at LGUs ng mga sasakyan. Depende po sa sitwasyon ng bawat lugar. Handa na lahat po kami pero hindi po namin i-deploy agad unless may shortage pa sa mga areas.
From the nation's capital, all sides, all the time. I'm Gretchen Ho.
And I'm Danny Laurel. The big story tonight.
Local government units and private institutions have started preparations ahead of the nationwide transport strike next week.
However, officials remain confident that they can address the expected supply gap in public transport. Marian Enriquez with the big story.
As early as now, you may want to plan your trips ahead of next week to avoid additional hassle in commuting. Several transport groups are set to push through with a nationwide week-long strike beginning March 6. The MMDA says it's still coordinating with LGUs on whether to suspend the coding scheme, but what's for sure is they will provide free rides.
We'll just make them available na in case na merong mga mai-stranded na mga pasahero, we can immediately send augmentation buses or transportation means.
The LTFRB has since remained confident that it can fill the transport gap next week, especially since the so-called Magnificent Seven, the biggest transport groups in the country, won't be joining the strike. Meanwhile, the Transportation Department is still hoping to win over stakeholders that are against the modernization program. Transportation Chief Jaime Bautista said they are urging the LTFRB to relax the requirements to enable more drivers and operators to join. Meanwhile, the Education Department says that classes will continue next week despite the transport strike. DepEd said that students who could not attend physical classes should be allowed to join online. Some universities have already suspended face-to-face classes as a way to assist their students and faculty. But while most are busy preparing for the transport strike next week, one commuter group is already concerned about the possible fare increase that will result from the modernization program. The group Para says minimum fares for modern jeepneys could go up to as much as 26 to 35 pesos.
Inevitable na mapupunta tayo sa ganong posisyon. No, hindi lang dahil sa yun yung kailangang return of investment, pero lalo na kapag yung mga malalaking corporations na yung nag-take over doon sa iba't ibang mga ruta ng jeepneys.
Discussions have yet to center on fares with the government and some jeepney operators still at a deadlock over the consolidation, the deadline for which has been extended to year-end. For News 5, Marian Enriquez, we are One News.
Here to answer our questions about the PUV modernization program, we have with us on the show Mr. Andy Ortega, Chairperson of the Office of Transportation Cooperatives. Good evening, sir. Thank you for joining us here on The Big Story.
Magandang gabi sa inyong dalawa.
I believe your office is part of the Department of Transportation.
Yeah, it's the Office of the Transport Cooperatives. We're the ones who help the drivers form into
Medyo
cooperatives.
nilinawin lang po natin tungkol doon sa cooperatives. Una-una, maaari po ba silang magtayo ng sarili nilang kooperatiba? At bakit po ba sinasabi ni Mar Valbuena that they are being forced to join a new cooperative and that these cooperatives are charging hefty fines?
Unang-una, based on this program, yung PUV modernization, talagang kailangan nilang mag-form into either corporations or kooperatiba. The main objective kaya tayo mag-form ng kooperatiba for these thousands of drivers is para magsama-sama sila. Because if a driver runs, kunyari, meron siya isang sasakyan, it's better na meron silang 15 or more to help themselves have a more professionally run system, cooperative. That's why the objective of the government is mag-form kayo ng kooperatiba, tutulungan kayo ng gobyerno, at magkakaroon kayo ng opportunity to avail of the financial support ng banks for you to go into the modernization of your fleets. That is the objective. Kaya kailangan kayo mag-kooperatiba, but that basically is one of the qualifications in this program.
Sir, ano yung transition plan for because it will take some time na makahanap ng kooperatiba and then yun nga loans are involved also application of loans and bigla-bigla bang mawawala yung franchise, hindi ma-renew if you don't form a cooperative? What's the transition
Very
plan?
good question yung pagpa-form ng kooperatiba. The deadline nito originally was 2019. So nung lumabas noong 2017, maybe a year or so, was the time for you to form a cooperative. Na-extend to ng 6 times. So ibig sabihin, yung pagpa-form ng cooperative was given to the drivers almost 4 years, 5 years na ang time frame for that. So it's really more than enough. But because yung government, they're aware, they're conscious of the concerns, kaya in-extend pa ulit ng LTFRB up to the end of December. So ngayon, yun ang objective nun, para once you form a cooperative, then tuloy-tuloy na tayo sa process. Yung pagkukuha ng mga modern jeepney, etc., that will follow
Come
later
after.
on.
Okay.
Ang objective lang natin
Cooperative muna.
is maglagay tayo ng end line or limit for all of us to go into that first objective.
Pero ano po yung sinasabi na kailangan pong magbayad ng 100 to 200,000?
Sa totoo lang, wala naman talagang gano'n kaming nalalaman or when I say nalalaman, wala yan sa patakaran. Because ang paid-up capital ng isang kooperatiba for you guys, for the cooperative to be formed is 300,000 pesos.
Okay.
So minimum is 15 na jeepney drivers or members. So 15, i-divide mo sa 300,000, so maximum is 20,000 dapat. Eh kung 30 kayo nakapag-form, edi 10,000 lang. So yung info na 100 or 200,000, we cannot confirm that saan ba galing yung balita na yon.
Okay.
So if it's true, then definitely wala dapat na ganon. Pero yung capital is only 300,000 for a cooperative.
Okay. Sir, tuloy pa rin ang transport strike despite this extension, despite the Senate hearing na mukha namang, the side was heard.
Yeah.
What is the position of the groups such as Manibela on the cooperative front? Sinasabi ba nila because they don't want this modernization to happen overnight, so yun na nga, ini-extend na po. Pero in terms of kailangan mag-set ng cooperative by December, ano po yung gusto nilang mangyari?
Siguro on the part of the government, parang nagtataka pa rin kami, even with the talks, with the information, not talks, with everything that has happened for the past week, especially yung Senate hearing which was done or chaired by Senator Grace Poe, wherein lumabas lahat ng pro, other sectors, government, all concerns were raised in that Senate hearing. And nandun si Mr. Balbuena, and he was asked, lumabas yung kanyang concern, and when his concern was raised by him, sinabi namin, ako mismo nagsabi, mukhang hindi po welga at ang solusyon.
Okay.
Ang solusyon sa nakikita namin na concern niya was more of mediation. Merong concern internally, so that is under my office turf. Kaya sinabi ko, why don't you go to our office, pag-usapan natin yung problema, because yung problema nila is not really about, you have to go and strike on that. There's a process for that. So, in fact, that was mentioned at the end by Senator Grace Poe, and we do hope. In fact, kaninang hapon, kausap ko si Secretary Bautista, I told him, I'll be here in your show, Secretary, ano po ba ang inyong marching orders? Andy, sabihin mo sa kanila, mag-usap kami, open pa rin ako sa pag-uusap, nandito pa rin ang gobyerno na makipag-usap sa kanila.
Yun nga lang po, pinoprotesta po kasi nila. It's not just the cooperatives, but also yung presyo nung modern jeepney, which they say is unreasonable, 2.5, 2.8
Yeah.
million pesos. Is there a certain prototype that
Yeah.
you're requiring for them to buy, or are you considering other cheaper alternatives?
Yeah. Tungkol sa presyo, come to think of it, ang ordinary traditional jeep is maybe 12 or 10 tao yung passengers. Obviously, it's much cheaper compared to yung dito sa modern jeepney na 22 ang nakaupo, maybe 15 ang nakatayo. So you're talking of almost 40 passengers in a jeep with certain modification. So kung presyo pag-uusapan, talagang mas mahal. Because
Okay.
we're talking about safety and all of those things. So also, just to add, ang pagpili ng jeep or modern jeep, it's not under the government's turf yon. Nasa kooperatiba yon. Sila ang mamimili what kind of jeepney, modern jeepney they will buy. So it's up to them kung bibili nila yung maybe 2.1 or 2.2 or maybe 3.3.
Or mas mura pa, pwede pa.
Or mas mura pa
Okay.
kung meron. So it is really their decision.
Sino po nag-a-approve ng mga types?
Very good. Ang nagde-decide po noon is DTI with all the standard specifications and then eventually final approval po ng DOTR. Kahapon, there was a special guest. Naging celebrity nga siya, si Mr. Sarao. I do believe
Okay.
it could be the apo ni Mr. Sarao.
Oo.
So,
Sarao Motors.
yeah, Sarao Motors. So lumabas doon that hindi obligado na bumili ka ng hindi mukhang jeep. You could
Okay.
still sell a modern jeepney
Na mukhang jeep.
na mukhang jeep
Basta the engines are
and other
compatible.
specifications. So, wala nagsasabi na bawal ang jeep. In fact, as of now,
Okay.
siguro may 6,000 tayong modern jeepney and I'm sure ang dami pa nating bibilhin, ibebenta. So, I'm sure eventually you will see the Sarao jeep running, modern jeep. It will still happen because it is allowed.
Sir, pag hindi po sila nakasali sa cooperative, are they phased out in effect
Yeah.
by December 31?
Ito yon. Up to end of December, that's the last day, which is months from today, na mag-join sila ng isang kooperatiba or mag-form.
Okay.
So yun yung deadline na binigay ng gobyerno, in-extend nga for how many times for them to do that. So kailangan mag-form na sila ng kooperatiba for them to go for the next phase. po.
If not,
If not, their franchise, individually yan
Okay.
ay kukunin na ng LTFRB, meaning hindi na
Hindi na
sila
sila
pwedeng
pwedeng-
magpasada. So we'll support them, magtulungan namin sila maghanap. In fact, merong proseso dito sa latest order na may mediation process pa. Kunyari, merong isang jeepney driver, gusto mag-join sa co-op. Sabi ng co-op, ayoko, papasok kami para ma-convince pa na tanggapin, or kung ayaw tanggapin, we will look at certain areas na baka pwedeng makapagbuo sila ng isa pang cooperative. So the government will help these drivers all the way up to December 31 para masatisfy yung requirement for them to have a cooperative.
Okay. Sir, final question because we're running out of
Yes.
time. Specifically, para ma-approve ang cooperative, yung consolidation,
Yes.
are they supposed to already have a loan or pinaprocess or dapat bang may pera para sa
That's
modernization?
later on. Pa, may
Wala,
kausap,
pwede
may
na.
kausap nga ako doon. Isa pa lang sa kanya. Tuloy lang. Basta mag-form ka muna at mag-join ka ng isang kooperatiba. That's a first step muna.
Saka naisipan yung,
Next
yung
move
gastos.
na yon, tulungan pa namin sila further doon.
Alright,
marami
maraming
pa akong
salamat po.
katanungan pero wala na tayong oras. Maraming salamat. Thank you so much for coming over to the studio, Mr. Andy Ortega, Chairperson of the Office of Transportation Cooperatives. You definitely have a lot on your hands. Happy weekend to
Happy
you.
weekend, sir.
Salamat.
Now, search operations for the missing medical chopper in Palawan continues. However, the rescuers are having a hard time conducting that search due to bad weather. The Provincial Disaster Risk Management Office says they have a possible lead on the crash site and are verifying the information. 5 people, including 1 patient, were on board the medical aircraft when it disappeared on its way to the Southern Palawan Provincial Hospital. The Philippine Adventist Medical Aviation Services, which owns the missing helicopter, is now also helping with the search operations.
Medyo affected lang po kami ng malakas na hangin at malalaking alon. Tayong identified na possible area because of the presence of oil leak.
After the break, the oil spill from the sunken oil tanker off the coast of Nauhan, Oriental Mindoro has reportedly reached 25 kilometers as authorities continue their search. We'll get more updates on this with concerned local government units in the affected areas. That when the big story returns, keep it here on One News. watching The Big Story here on One News. The oil spill from the sunken MT Princess Empress off Nauhan Oriental Mindoro has worsened and has now affected nearby towns. Here's what we know. The 6-kilometer oil spill has now spread in waters of Pola, Pinamalayan, Gloria, Bansud, and Bongabong. These areas have been designated by authorities as exclusion areas, which means residents are not allowed to swim, fish, or come into contact with coastline waters due to health hazards. In Pola, at least 11 barangays were affected by the oil spill. These photos taken by a local in barangays Bakawan and Buhay na Tubig show black and thick oil reaching the shores. Residents of Pola have conducted their own cleanup drives on the shorelines using their own pails and makeshift containers. The local government of Pola has now declared a state of calamity and is calling on the national government for help in cleaning up and removing oil from their waters. Now, these photos posted by the information agency of Mimaropa, meanwhile, show dead seabirds and fish spotted along Barangay Tagumpay, also in the town of Pola. The agency notes that at least 22 marine protected areas have been affected by the oil spill. Now, over in Bongabong, traces of fuel are found under boats. The local government fears the oil spill will also damage their reefs and mangroves. The Philippine Coast Guard has earlier confirmed that the sunken cargo tanker is now leaking industrial oil. MT Princess Empress was reportedly carrying around 800,000 liters of industrial oil, an amount that the Coast Guard says could lead to an environmental catastrophe.
And to check on the situation on the ground, we have with us via Zoom Vincent Gahol, Provincial Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Officer of Oriental Mindoro. Hello, sir.
Good evening, ma'am, and good evening to all our viewers.
We also have on the line Pola Mayor Jennifer Cruz to give us updates from their municipality. Welcome to The Big Story, ma'am.
Good evening, ma'am.
Okay. Una po, sir, no? Ano po yung assessment po ninyo of the current situation in Nauhan and nearby areas? Gaano na po kalawak ngayon yung oil spill at gaano ka rami na rin po yung na-contain na area po natin?
Yes po. So far ngayon, ma'am, 7 municipalities na po yung affected nitong oil spill. Ano po? Ito po yung bayan ng Nauhan, Pola, Pinamalayan, Gloria, Bansud, Bongabong, at saka po itong bayan ng Rojas. Ito na po yung mga naabot. Ano? Bagamat sa bayan ng Rojas po ay mga 2 kilometers offshore pa po itong langis, pero pinangangambahan po na dahil sa patuloy na malakas agos at malakas na hangin ay mapadpad din ito sa kanilang mga baybayin po.
Okay,
so, ganito na po yung extent ano po. So, 7 municipalities out of 15 ano po ang naabot na po nitong oil spill.
Okay. Sir, may estimate ba or may kaalaman ba ng maximum extent ng damage nito in terms of areas affected but also in terms of marine life and protection?
So far, ma'am, patuloy po yung ginagawang risk and impact assessment po ng ating mga experts ng national government from EMB, BFAR, ano po, and iba pa mga units ng DNR, kasama po yung iba pang private sectors gaya ng Malampaya Foundation at yung iba pa mga power companies na tumutulong po dito sa amin. So far, wala pa po kaming bilang eksaktong mga data ng mga naapektuhan po dun sa ilalim. Ano po. Pero kasi ang nakikita pa lang po nating problema ay ito nga sa surface. Ito po mga nakalutang na mga oil na pumupunta po dito sa ating mga shores. Ano po. At ang isang malaking pangamba nga po namin, baka itong mga langis na ito ay tumagas na pababa at ang epekto po nito ay sa mga coral reefs po ito kakapit at saka sa mga seagrass namin dito at siguradong papatay nito itong mga corals at mga seagrass na pinamamahayan po ng mga isda dito sa aming lugar.
Sir, para malinaw lang po, paano po ba yung proseso ng pangongolekta o pag-contain ng oil spill? Sinusunog po ba ito? Mechanical po ba yung pag-collect? How are we going to reach those deep areas and contain it?
para po makita natin yung buong picture, tuloy-tuloy na kasing lumubog itong barko at ang laman nito na 800,000 liters na industrial fuel oil ay sumama sa ilalim. So, nung una sinasabi ng Coast Guard po, yung tumagas sa langis ay crude oil. Pero pagkalipas ng ilang araw, yung napunta na sa shorelines ng pinamalayan ng Pola at ng iba pang mga lugar po ay makakapal at sobrang itim na parang asfalto na mga langis. Gaya po ng nakikita natin dyan sa pictures. Po. So, ang initial assessment din po ng ating mga expert, hindi na ito basta crude oil lang, kundi ito na yung IFO o industrial fuel oil na laman po nitong barko.
Okay.
So sa ngayon po, ang containment effort na ginagawa natin, lalo na po ng Coast Guard, ay makapaglagay ng mga spill boom. Kaya lamang po, ang disadvantage po namin ngayon ay itong weather, yung malakas na alon at saka malakas na hangin. Kaya yung mga barko ng Coast Guard ay hindi po makalusong para makapaglagay ng spill boom doon sa areas. So, wala pa rin mga mechanical at saka mga advanced technology na nagagawa po para sipsipin o i-extract yung langis po doon sa loob ng barko. So far, ang kaya pa lang po namin gawin ay i-utilize yung mga local materials dito gaya ng mga palapa, gaya ng mga bunot ng nyog, yung kogon at saka mga dayami, na sinabi na natin sa mga local government.
We seem to have lost the audio on that.
Okay. In the meantime, Mayor Cruz, can you comment po? Pola now is under state of calamity,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Yes.
Yes po.
Kamusta naman po yung response? Sapat ba? And what changes are you hoping to achieve to contain the situation?
Yun nga, ma'am. Alam niyo, ang Pola talaga, parang sobrang na-damage, nasapol talaga ng oil spill. At until now, yung company, wala pang pakita sa amin dito para tanungin ano ba ang nangyari sa aming bayan. Although pumunta sa isang barangay, tinanong lang, pero hindi pa nagpapakita sa amin sa munisipyo. So yung 11 barangay sa amin, lahat yun affected ng oil spill. So hindi natin alam kung paano na yung ating oil kung saan pa dadalhin. Although meron na sinabi ang DNR sa amin na ilagay lang and baka pick upin ng isang truck nila after namin na mailagay lahat sa mga drums. Kung mapapansin niyo po yung halos lahat na lumalabas na pictures ay nanggaling po sa bayan ng Pola dahil kami po talaga yung tinamaan ng sobra ng oil spill. At sobrang baho po talaga. Sabi ko nga kung hindi pa magpapakita ang Impress company, magpa-file na po kami ng case against them.
Okay, ma'am, nakakuha na po ba kayo ng more assistance because you were calling on for more organizations na hindi niyo po kakayanin
Yes,
itong mag-isa?
So far, tomorrow darating po ang secretary ng DSWD sa ating bayan and darating din po yung iba po ay darating yung galing sa Dole para mas matugunan po yung iba nating fisher folk dahil ako po, pinagbawalan ko na po maglayag at mag-fishing ang lahat ng fisher folks natin. Hindi na rin po tayo pumapayag. Starting kahapon po, hindi na po kami nagpapaligo sa ating shoreline. So bawal na po lahat. Kaya medyo mabigat po para sa amin ang mga tao na wala pong makakain dahil yan po yung unang pinag-aakitaan nila.
Okay.
So mabigat po sa bayan ng Pola ito. Yung nangyari.
Opo. Mayor, apart po from the photos na nakikita namin na medyo mahirap talaga, may mabibigay po ba kayong numbers, assessment, kung ilang tao ang affected, kung gaano po kalala ang sitwasyon in terms of the environmental impact, yung pera?
Affected is 3,563, more or less. 3,563 more or less po ang nasa shoreline natin doon sa 11 barangays po natin. And doon naman po sa yung fisher folks doon, 50% of it nito ay seizure po.
Alright, maraming salamat po and hoping of course for continued efforts there and na meron namang mangyayari in terms of the
Yes,
ones,
ma'am.
the private companies as well involved here. Maraming salamat
Thank you,
po.
ma'am.
Paula Mayor Jennifer Cruz and Oriental Mindoro PDRMO's Vincent Gahol. The Juan Meralco Foundation has provided solar panels for the Barangay Health Center of the remote Polopina Island in Concepcion, Iloilo. The center used to offer limited health services to the around 800 families in the island due to the lack of electricity. But now the solar panels are providing power for their medical equipment. At least 16 islands in Concepcion, Iloilo still have no electrical connection. Local authorities say they are in talks with the Energy Department to provide power to these communities, but the government says it is difficult to connect some rural areas to the main grid. Juan Meralco Foundation says they have now provided solar panels to almost 70,000 houses and 300 schools, both in Polopina and a sitio in Tanay, Rizal. The foundation is also eyeing to provide more of these solar panels in other rural areas here in the country.
It's one of the programs namin sa LGU. Dahil yung aming mga barangay islands, particularly pag inclement weather, mahirap maabot ng mga health workers from the poblasyon.
In an island like this, parang ang layo ng main hospital, so maganda malapatan ng pangunang lunas. No? Kung di man, bago pa lumala ang karamdaman, dapat ma-diagnose na dito para maaga pa maitakbo.
Right after the break. As volunteers and relief workers continue to dig through the rubble of devastated buildings in Turkey, some stunning stories of survival are coming to the fore, just like this one. Find out more when the big story returns. Keep it here on One News. You're still watching the big story here on One News. The Binyan PNP has confirmed that one of the suspects in the hazing that led to the death of John Matthew Salilig is dead. The Binyan police identified the suspect as alias Sakmal. He was the driver of one of the vehicles Salilig's fraternity brothers used to bring his body to Imus, Cavite. Alias Akmal is also an alumnus of Tau Gamma Phi at Adamson University, but on February 28, he was found dead by his relatives. Meanwhile, DOJ prosecutors have dismissed a complaint for obstruction of justice against the father of a person of interest in the death of Sariling. Justice spokesperson Miko Clavano said the complaint against the father was dismissed for lack of probable cause with reasonable certainty of conviction. Clavano likewise noted that 7 have already surrendered out of the 15 persons of interest in the case, including the alleged master initiator.
And before we go, however difficult life may seem, it matters that you just do not give up. And this saying goes for a horse in Turkey and the rescuers who dug it out of the rubble of a building. The horse was found alive 21 days after the earthquake that struck parts of Turkey and Syria, which has since claimed 51,000 lives. A clip showing volunteers teaming up to rescue the animal was shared on Twitter by Tansu Yegen. The team began working immediately to rescue the animal from the rubble, and after several hours, they were able to extract the horse. Stories of hope continue to be read and seen in Turkey as the country tries to recover from this devastating quake.
And that's the big story tonight. For more updates, follow News 5, the Philippine Star, and Business World online. You may also log on to onenews.ph for more analysis. I'm Gretchen Ho.
The big story is also available via our Signal Play app, so make a free account now that's at signalplay.com and stream One News anytime, anywhere. I'm Dani Laurel. Stay safe, Philippines.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.